I was sitting in the back room of Joe Barnabas' rug shop reading the Torah with Pete Simon when Joshua came. We looked up unexpectedly, but he sat down over in a corner and immediately became enthroned in his own thoughts. Big Pete looked into my eyes, then to one side, and we both got up and went outside. Out front there were a few Roman soldiers on leave from occupation duty in the provinces. They were idly looking over the cheaper tapestries they were thinking of sending to their women or to their folks back home. Aside from that, there were a few rich matrons with their serf girls and the wife of our Roman overlord. She was blonde, fat, over 40, and haggled with Joe in a whiskey voice. There were too many people around, so we went outside. "What's doing with Josh, Pete?" I asked as we made our way over to Lazarus Steinman's kosher delicatessen. "One never knows," murmured the beefy ex-fish skinner. "One just never knows, Tom." Pete always was out of place as far as I was concerned. He spent his younger years with the Mediterranean trawlers catching anchovies. In his 20s, he won a couple of Arabian dabbers in a gaming with some Greeks, and ran guns to the Bedouins in Lebanon during the Roman siege a few years ago. Then he supplied fish at cut rate to the Romans when the Lebanon boys gave out. He was a big, hulking man who spent his time living it up and politicking in all the East Mediterranean ports where he traded. He had a thick beard and a blunt prize-fighter's face. Contact with Josh had changed him a lot. Now all he ever did was read the Torah with a distant glow in his eyes and listen to Josh's weird little parables. Big Pete left the fishing business in the hands of his cousins, who were generous and did not cheat him out of his share of the profits. Also, he settled down with a nice little wife from over Nazareth way, and was raising a couple of cute kids out in the Bethany suburbs. Presently, we got to Lazzie's place. I ordered lox and bagel, and Pete ordered pastrami on rye. This place was owned by the guy Josh had raised from the dead, and was known as a hangout for Josh's followers and his sympathizers. Romans did not frequent the place because it would look bad to their overlords, and the Greeks, Arabs, and regular Judeans were too superstitious to be served by a dead man, so we could talk here. "Well," said Pete finally, "here's the deal. The Pharisees have been getting perturbed about the way the big man has been putting them down. Jude Iscariot's dad just gave him the word. Josh better shape up or he's going to get the axe." His voice grew growling and sullen. He hated the small-minded post-Maccabean Pharisee bureaucrats. He went on. "It seems these Pharisee schlemiels don't like to be caught in the wrong by the son of a Nazareth carpenter. It loses them both prestige and money. The loss of the latter especially they do not like. People tell me his dad is getting pretty impatient with his loyalty to Josh. They also say he's gone pretty far in debt to his father to keep up his riotous living. They say his father is going to sell him down the drain by hawking him out if he doesn't quit this kick. Try to convince Josh that he should use his public touch to start..." He paused and looked into my eyes. "To start the rebellion. Where did you get this?" "Luke Marchetti, that Roman attaché to Herod's court. We used to be drinking buddies, and frankly," he looked from side to side and lowered his voice to a whisper, "the guy is a sympathizer. One of his old Roman bosses in the army had faith enough in Josh's power to ask him to heal the old Gallic serfs who raised the great general from childhood. You remember the case, Tom?" "Oh, yeah," I replied. "But how can you be sure about those Romans? I've watched them for a pretty good part of my life, and..." "Hell!" he cut me off, slamming his fist on the table with a roar. "The Romans may be crooks, but they don't try to hide it like those Pharisee bastards do. I know an honest Roman when I see one. I've done business with them for quite a few years. Luke doesn't lie." "Okay, Pete, okay. Calm down. You want to throw us all out on the working camps? Easy." He gulped his anger back and calmed down. "Well, I think that Josh is being a stupid fool." Pete restrained himself. "Well, pretty unwise to let that cheating kid Jude hang around. He sure is a hypocrite. He stands there while we're out trooping around and looks so pure. I hear that he was pretty angry when Marie Magdalene quit putting out for him." "I know right there what you mean, Pete," I said. "I can't figure a guy in our group claiming to be so pure when he's out in public, and then heading over to the 10th Legion bathhouse to get his jollies while Josh is out on one of his fasts or resting up or busy with some kind of healing work. I just don't see what he adds to the group. This time I think Josh is letting his ideals carry him away. I've heard Josh telling him to cut it out, to settle down and get married. The guy's good-looking enough to get just about any woman in the city he wants. He sure has the money to burn. Hell, from what I hear, he just about burns it." Yeah, and it's money his dad has sucked out of the poor, hard-working people. He's never worked hard in his life. He's never worked at all in his life. Just look at the choir boy that shot public money to hell, rotting himself out. He turns my stomach. Matt Levis came to our table. He always had something to say. Well, I haven't seen Josh go wrong yet, have you boys? We thought about that. No, we said simultaneously. We really haven't. We figured Josh must have some reason for keeping the punk around. God knows, Matt Levis started out as a rat-faced tax collector. Now he was accepted as one of the best people in our group. Maybe it would take time. So far, 3 years hadn't shown much difference in the kid. If anything, he'd become even more of a lush than he was at the start. Worse, he hid it. Well, we ate when Josh came in. We offered him a seat. He looked through each of us with the crystal eyes which expressed all the tragedy, all the affection, all the deepness of a man chosen. He waited for one of us to speak. "What's up, boss?" Pete asked. "A lot of things, Pete. I wish I could fill you in right here and now, but," he assured, looking at each of us, "that's not the way things are." Something about him never encouraged questions. Maybe it was a different focus of the thing which made utter asses of the Pharisees at other moments. Then Lassie came up with our stuff, and noticing his entrance upon the scene, fixed up Josh's favorite eats, coffee, bagel, pickle, and pastrami. "What's new, Laz?" Josh asked. "Nothing much, Chief, except that a couple of Caesar's boys were hanging in here a while ago, asking your whereabouts." "Yeah, I know," Josh admitted quietly. "But thanks for mentioning it." It was funny how he always knew what was happening. He wasn't faking it either. There wasn't a dishonest element in him. I know. I used to think he was trying to snow us under with all this jazz about always knowing what was coming off just about anywhere you'd care to think to ask him about. I used to try him on the gladiation tournament scores from Rome. I'd be out preaching with him all day, watching him heal quite a few different people. I would try to taunt him by saying, "Chief, bet you can't tell me who won the Corinth-Pompey games today." "Look, Tom," he would grin and say, "I know you're just a big skeptical intellectual and all this rot, but just to keep the old record straight." Here we'd all laugh, and to make you feel better. Corinth 127, Pompey 97. And he would be right when we checked the radio. Well, we knew he hadn't heard the radio or seen the television all day, and even if he had, the game scores didn't come up until late in the day, so he wasn't faking. We had to keep all this quiet, though, because if the Roman boys got wind of this, they'd try to take some sort of advantage, such as trying to get Big Josh to give them information on the games so they could make bets. Not that he would have to or anything, but it just would have been a constant nuisance. Although I must say, I'm not sure that any of those boys would have had the nerve to approach him like that. It's hard to explain effectively to someone who hasn't met Josh for himself. The only people who tried to stand up to him were the hard kind, those confirmed in their erroneous ways. It wasn't because they thought he was a crackpot or anything, but because they knew he represented something that they could never acquire. Anyway, to get back to the story, when the Roman boys were around, it usually meant one of two things, something very good or something very bad. Matt fired the first question. "What's the deal, Josh?" "Let's put it this way," he said, chewing his pastrami and pickle bagel. "I'm going to tap out for a while, out beyond the suburbs in Gethsemane Gardens." "Yeah, boss, but what about the tourists?" Pete asked. "There won't be any." Oh. When the boss said he was going to tap out, it meant he was going to go into one of his prayerful sojourns. Something big always happened, either before, during, or after one of these sessions he used to have. "Pete," Josh said, "bring Zeb's boys and come yourself. I feel like I need company this time." Thud. This had never happened before. We were all hit. "Time has come, boss?" Matt asked quietly. "Yep, it looks like it, Matt," he admitted. "And if it were anyone else, I would say he was in a trance." Then he pulled out a little bit and continued. "Tom?" "Yeah, boss?" Look, he said, sipping his coffee. "I want you to bring all the boys in around noon tomorrow." "Laz?" Uh-huh. He was shocked. "Snap out of it, kid. Need your help." Josh waited until the smog cleared from his eyes. "Can you have the back room set up for a luncheon tomorrow?" Sure thing. Good. There'll be 13 of us. You can sit in too if you want. We had these little get-togethers occasionally. They were usually fruitful occasions when Josh would try to cram out thick heads with his great message. No, I won't say that either. He almost didn't care. He let us do the cramming. Even Jude tried to do some constructive thinking. We just had to. It was like having gold tossed at our feet along with the big safe to store it in, and refusing it if we didn't. Suddenly, Josh looked very sad. Cousin John got the old 1-2 the other day. That's all he said. We knew this lunch would be important. Well, Matt went out after most of the boys, and for some reason I decided to go find Jude. His haywire activities never ceased to fascinate me. I never had known such a jackrabbit in all my life, especially one like him, who could stand up in the meeting hall and talk endlessly about the virtues of poverty and chastity. He sure takes after his old man. Well, I thought I'd look in at the bathhouse. Jude was allowed to hobnob freely with the Romans because of his dad. And he had, I must admit, gotten some of the boys of the 10th Legion interested in Josh's work, probably in spite of himself. I found him lolling in the water in one of the smaller lukewarm pools, talking to some fat friend who was up on the deck on a high marble slab, getting his back massaged by a sharp-looking, stacked 15-year-old brunette who was covered by a large gym towel that extended from just below the upper part of her cleavage to about 4 inches above her knees. A small gold chain around her left ankle indicated she was the property of Fatso, Claude Fabian, who had a cigar stuck in his thin-lipped kisser, and held up a bunch of purple grapes he was planning to eat, sort of like a chameleon getting ready to stick his tongue out at some poor defenseless insect. The girl looked frightened. Her sleek white arms worked her hands smoothly over the fat pink flesh, but she was biting her lip. And there were tears ready to overflow from her soft doe eyes. I listened closely to the Roman that Claude and Jude were speaking. "Claude, I just don't see it," Jude was saying. "Why should you humiliate this girl? She's never been seen nude by anyone but her mother before. Look at her. Hell, I bet she's a virgin." Claude grinned lecherously. Yep, she still is. But I'm going to take care of that little problem before the day gets much older. Look at the flesh on her, lad. Wouldn't you like to get some of that? Come on now, wouldn't you? The girl apparently understood Italian. Her chin trembled, and she suddenly fell to her knees, sobbing. "Ah, hell," Claudius spoke emotionlessly. "I've seen this before. Give her some wine, Rufus," he said to an old, emaciated serf who was standing near. "And put a stick in it." The old serf knew what he meant, grinned with lizard lips, and grabbed a special bottle he had already. She literally bawled. Jude couldn't take it. "How much did you pay for this one?" he asked. 50,000 lira, came the answer. "I'll triple that if you sell her to me," Jude offered. "Idiot! Fool! I thought you were just going to have her yourself. You have no value of money, Jude. You could get one for yourself for the same price I did. Yet because a fat old man like me has this one, it infuriates your blood and you want her. Well, never let it be said that I spoilt a young man's vanity, especially for such a ruby price. You have her. Done. Hey, Rufus, could you fetch me my bundle over there? Thanks." Jude pulled his live body out of the water, dried off, and wrote a check for the amount. The girl was still crying, but had calmed down some. Jude noticed me. "Oh, hi, Tom." He was busy, and looked back at his new interest. She crawled on her knees over to him, kissing his feet. She was trembling, and I noticed where plastic surgery had left only the faintest trace of small whip scars on her beautiful white back. The fat one and his old serf were laughing. Jude was embarrassed. Finally, he got up. "Hey, cut it out now. Get up." She rose and thankfully looked him in the eyes. "And take that damn chain off your ankle." She bent but fumbled. "Wait." He bent down and unfastened it. Here. Now, what's your name?" Helen, she said. "Okay. Have you any street clothes?" She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Go put them on, then." She ran out of the room. Jude stared at me, and I wondered what was going on behind the Adonis face. "We'll take her to stay with Josh's mother," he said simply. "That kid is not a whore." An improvement, I thought. Fatso looked surprised. To cap the point, Jude added, "Rufus, bring the phone." Jude picked up the receiver and said, "Desk. Page a Leggett, and tell him to come to pool 12. Thanks." He grinned at me. We waited. Soon a little man with 2 soldiers, a typewriter, a walkie-talkie, and a dictaphone came into the room. "Got her papers, Claude?" Claude shrugged, looked at Jude as if he were completely insane, and said, "Sure." Then he asked Rufus to produce the purchase card, which he was required by law to carry. Jude simply looked at the card, noted the name, which I later learned was Helen Cornicos, gave it to the legate, and told him, "Free her and give her her papers." The officials went through the process like machines. The girl came back into the room wondering what it was all about. She was dressed pleasantly in a Grecian-style tunic. She went hysterical when she found out she was free under his sponsorship. She had to be snapped out of it. Then she hugged Jude as hard as she could, and he grinned at us like a teenager who had just been given a kiss by his favorite movie star. The three of us, Jude, the girl, and I, walked out of the bathhouse and caught a carriage over to Josh's mother's. She was spiritual, a motherly sort of woman in her late 40s, who had raised 5 children in the best tradition. She immediately took to Helen and said she would take good care of her. We left, and in the carriage on the way to Barney's rug shop, we talked things over. "That was a nice thing you did, Jude. Damn nice," I commented. Jude didn't seem to know what to say. He paused as if thinking over his answer. Finally, he said, "Well, I don't know. That is, I kind of felt sorry for her. She's just a kid, not too young or anything like that, but just a kid, and, well, I couldn't see that fat slob forcing himself on her. Anyhow, she'll be well taken care of where she is," he continued. "I'll pay for her keep while I can, and I'll drop around and see her once in a while. I like her. Oh, don't get the wrong idea. My intentions are on the up and up. This horsing around isn't getting me any younger or doing me very much good. I think that I ought to start thinking about settling down." It was good to hear. The kid was finally coming around. I decided to change the subject, just for the sake of variety. We talked about Josh's work, and I filled him in on recent happenings. He didn't seem too happy. We spent the remainder of that day thinking over what had happened. The next day started out just like any other. I got up, shaved, showered, got dressed, and went over to Lazzie's place to see if I could be of any help in setting up the luncheon that afternoon. Pete and Matt, the usual hang-arounds, were there. We talked over a cup of coffee. "I'm disgusted," Pete said. Okay, Pete, okay. So you went to sleep. So it's over the dam, so forget it already. Crying over spilt vodka ain't gonna make a party, Matt advised. "I don't give a damn. It's the principle of the thing. Twice he woke us up and asked if we could please help out. Twice we said, yeah, sure, sorry, boss. And twice we went back to sleep. I could kick myself from here to Cairo and back." Changing the subject might help, I thought, so I mentioned Jude's new character. I told the boys what happened the day before. Pete, always glad to hear of someone doing something decent, was happier. Matt was satisfied. Exposure to Josh's influence had again changed someone for the better. We had 4 hours until noon. All we had to do was sit around and wait for Josh and the rest of the boys to arrive. We did some prayerful thinking and read the Torah. We all wanted to get as much as we could out of this. About an hour after I arrived, Jude walked in with his newfound prize, Helen. She was in one of Josh's mother's simple homespun dresses and looked happy in a quiet way. She had Jude's old fraternity pin on her dress, and he was wearing a red scarf around his left arm. It was evident that they were going steady. "Hi, fellas. Meet Helen," he said. "Over here is Matt Levis, Pete Simon, and you know Tom." We all said hi. Matt and Pete shook Jude's hand and seemed happy the kid had finally shaped up. Jude grinned and said, "Josh's mom brought her downtown shopping, and I just happened to run into them. I also just happened to have a red scarf," and we all laughed. "Yeah," Pete added good-naturedly, "but you kids hardly know each other yet." "Maybe not, but it's a good way for them to get acquainted," Matt said. "Yes, this is true," Pete admitted with mock seriousness. We forgot for a while that this was a luncheon day and that Josh had said that this was it. We were so glad about Jude and his girl. But eventually, Jude and Helen left to rejoin Josh's mother. Jude said he would definitely be back later. We settled down to doing nothing but contemplating and reading the Torah for another 3 hours. Well, the boys started drifting in, and we moved into the back room, which had been set up during the previous hours. Close to Passover, so the table was set up on one side and at the ends only. Eventually, Jude got back. He had a serious expression on his face instead of the usual sanctimonious, blasé expression of one who is trying to affect moral purity. Nobody did much talking. Finally, Josh came in, followed by Lazarus. Josh sat down. "Let's eat, boys. I'm hungry," he said with genuine boyish enthusiasm. Silverware started clicking, goulash was brought in, so was lox, bagel, brisket, pastrami, niches, and potato pancakes. Pickles and coffee were not forgotten either. Also, we had huge round cakes of about the best melt-in-your-mouth matzahs I've ever had in my life. And good blackberry, boysenberry, cherry, and strawberry wines yet. I never ate so well in all my life. Finally, after the table was cleared, except for a few cakes of matzah bread and a new decanter of Concord grape wine, which had been brought in after we were finished, we quieted down as if someone turned us off with a switch. Josh stood up. Well, boys, this one will be basically pretty short, as I've told some of you, and don't get excited, it's not as bad as all that. This is it. Certain so-called influences are going to come and get me, and take a stab at wiping me out. It will look as though they have, but don't be fooled by appearances. Anyway, I'm going to divvy up the job of keeping the work going between you guys. I know that you don't seem to get exactly what's happening with the healing work, but seeds have been planted, and you will soon grow into a pragmatic understanding of the whole thing. Naturally, we were curious. Basically, how's it going to happen, boss? Pete asked. One of you is going to blow the whistle on me, Pete. Who is it? Come on, boss, just tell me, who is it? The son of a bitch! Rest easy, Pete, it might be any of you guys. Might even be you. Pete was shaken. But don't sweat it too much, Josh added. Any of you guys, don't sweat it. Won't do any good. At any rate, I have this matzah here and this wine. Each of you take a glass. We did, and he broke up the matzah and started to pass pieces of it. While he was in the middle of it, Lazarus came in. Jude, he said, phone call. Party says it's urgent. Excuse me, boss, he said, and left the room. The bread was passed out, the wine was drunk, and each of us felt somehow we had gained something, an active part in Josh's work. Josh told us that anyone could hang around as long as he wanted to discuss religious work. We all stayed. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Jude returned with a worried expression on his face and 4 strangers in plain clothes. He walked with his head bent down like a man under a great yoke. His eyes were somehow dim, and his hands dangled loosely from powerless arms hanging at his side. Something made us all go towards the back of the room, as if some giant hand had gently pushed us aside. That left Josh out in the front of the deserted table. The 4 strangers made a half-circle around their end of the room, with Jude in the center, facing Josh 10 feet away. Then, with steps that clanked through the back room banquet hall, Jude walked up to Josh, raised his arms heavily, grabbed Josh on the shoulders, drew him near, and whispered something to him. With that, the strangers in the back drew out belly guns, moved forward, grabbed Josh, and backed out of the room. Pete moved fast. He jumped over the table, grabbed a carving knife that was left there, went up to one of the strangers, and hacked off his ear. We thought surely Pete was a goner. Suddenly, Josh turned his head and said, "Easy, Pete." The same force that shoved us to the back of the room made the strangers, who were holding on to Josh, loosen their grip, and Josh walked over to the injured man, who was standing with his hands still at his sides, dumbfounded. Josh merely picked up his severed ear and stuck it back on his head. Instantly it adhered, and looked as if nothing had happened. The man was still dumbfounded. Thanks, he said. Don't mention it, Josh answered. Now the other strangers' mouths dropped open. Josh went back to his place between the 2 men and said, "Well, come on, what are you waiting for? Let's go." They followed Jude out of the room and slammed the door. Well, the next day, after something of a kangaroo court, they hung him up. The day after that, I was sitting in the back of Barney's rug shop reading the Torah. Pete Simon came in with miserable eyes and said, "Come on, let's go over to Lazzie's." The usual types of people were still milling stupidly around the rug shop. We made our usual silent, instinctive way over to the delicatessen. Matt and Lazzie were there listening to the radio. It was almost noon. We sat down silently. Pete grumbled. Three times I said I didn't know him. Well, hell, I'm not going to let that one grab me by the tail, damn it. Not this time. The news came on. Josh's execution was mentioned, and also the suicide by hanging of Jude Iscariot, the notorious playboy son of local #1 Pharisee. A fit ending, Pete said. One of the few decent things he did in his life. We sat around silent, sullen, and hungry for the next hour. Then something completely unexpected happened. A short, beefy little Italian in a Roman officer's uniform came in carrying a small Gothic tape recorder, the kind made in the German provinces in Northern Europe. "Hi, Luke," he'd said. "Lazzy, Matt, Tom, meet Luke Marchetti. You remember, the man I was telling you about." We shook hands. "What's new, Luke?" he'd asked. "Something you might be interested in. I have been doing some work with the secret police. We had particular interests in the activities of Old Man Iscariot and Claude Fabian. Well, our suspicions came true. Both of them are being sent to Rome to undergo trial for conspiracy to overthrow the government. But there's a special angle to the thing. Pharisee Iscariot realized that Josh was being a menace to established clergy. He was mocking them for their hypocrisy and pulling no punches, as we all know. Well, he also realized that Josh had terrific public contact, and he had hopes that his son Jude might be able to talk Josh into cooperating. Well, when Old Man Iscariot saw that this was not possible, he got on the phone and told Jude to get over to his place, and, well, here, I'll turn on the tape. You'll see." The first voice we heard was Jude's. "Dad, look, it's impossible to talk Big Josh into that. You don't know. You've never seen him. No, that's out." "Then you'll have to put the finger on it." "No, I won't. Just what the hell makes you think you can make me? Listen to him talk, my fat old man, trying to push me around." "Don't sound so omnipotent, Jude." It was Claude Fabian. "No, Jude," his old man added, talking with a sly smile in his voice. He continued, "Don't sound so omnipotent. You seem to forget that any source of power that you may seem to think you have is tied up in the purse strings of your fat old man." "So what the hell do I care about that? So you crap down on me. So I'm working my tail off to pay you back for 6 months. For a year then. So big deal." "Not so fast, son. Claude tells me that there's a certain slave girl you bought from him for 3 times the price she's worth." "So what? I freed her." "No, you didn't, son. You hadn't any right to, unless you paid for her. And son, you didn't pay for her." Jude stammered. Apparently he was starting to sob. What do you mean?" "Simply this, that I'm not paying for her. That means you don't own her. That means you can't free her. It's a very simple process to have her repossessed. And I sure will know what to do with her." "Oh boy, will I," Claudius interjected, undressing her with his voice. You wouldn't, Dad, you wouldn't. You're a Pharisee, you can't." "Wouldn't I?" Jude knew he would, and broke down crying. "Pull yourself together, Jude. If you do what your father tells you, you can have the little girl for all your own," he said mockingly. The sound of Jude sobbing could be heard for a while. Then he started to come out of it, and said, Anything. I'll do anything. You name it. That's more like it." Luke turned off the machine. We all sat around for a while as it sunk in. Finally, we each got up and walked out.